Excited to have Aaron Torres back on the podcast. Aaron, you're up to so much. Thanks so much for taking some time to come on again.
First of all, you're up to so much. Two things. One, for people watching on YouTube, I did the wardrobe change just for you, Jared.
Thank you.
But you're up to, I mean, you were at the golf tournament a few weeks ago. I still call it the GHO.
Yeah.
But you were at the golf tournament, UConn football, UConn basketball, international travel. I don't even know I don't know how do you have more than 24 hours in your day? It feels like, and you're hosting this incredible podcast where I know you had RJ Cole and Coach Mora and Coach Hurley. So I'm flattered. Thank you for having me. And, I don't know how you pack it all into 24 hours. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know how I do it all sometimes too, but it's been a great summer, and I think everyone's ready now to get the college sports season back underway, especially here. I think there's a lot of excitement, and I'll start there. You mentioned Coach Mora. He was on my podcast. He was on yours. Take me through what you're thinking about Coach Mora in this UConn football team, because I think there's been a newfound excitement around here for this program that he's been able to bring.
Well, there's no doubt. And, Jared, I think it probably goes back to, and honestly, I mean, I'll be honest, it goes back a long time, but just for the sake of this conversation, we'll stick to this time last year where, UConn is, I mean, I had some epic social media rants, August into September of 2021, because UConn takes the entire 2020 season off.
Yeah.
And, there was all sorts of stuff, and I don't want to get political in the first answer, but, they do it and they say it's for the players and it's for safety and we need to build up the this and the that. And then you go out and you lose to Fresno. I think it was 45-0 was the final score, and it's embarrassing and whatever. And so, a few weeks later, we know what happens with Coach Edsall. And me being on the national scale, I said, look, yes, I'm a UConn guy. I can be a little bit of a homer at some points, but I know there's more for this football program than what I think most people outside of Connecticut or UConn fans or alums, would think. And so, I think this time last year, there was a thought, and I don't know how much you talked about it on this show, but you got to drop down to the FCS, or you have to do this, or you have to do that. And I said, and this has been my talking point, for the last year and a half, is I'm not ever going to pretend UConn's Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, but you talk about a state program, a state-supported school, facilities, resources, state
Absolutely,
funding. Yeah, Rentschler Field. I was at UConn shortly after Rentschler Field opened as a student. My parents are still season ticket holders. I've been in that place when there's 40,000 people and it's rocking. And I said, I wouldn't. I'm not saying this is Alabama, and I think the fan base is realistic, but it's not what America has seen over the last 4, 5, 6 years. And I said, it's just going to take the right guy that sees what I see, what I know you see, what I know so many of our listeners see in UConn as potential in the athletic department. And so I think Coach Mora has been that guy. And I spoke with him, probably now January or February. I can't remember exactly when. And the one thing that stood out to me was, one, how excited he was.
For sure.
And how much he believes in the potential of UConn football, and what that ceiling is, is another conversation for another day. But, he's really embraced being a state school. He's really embraced, he said on my podcast, I haven't had a chance to listen to yours, but he said the facilities here, we have people that have worked in the SEC, that have worked in the Big Ten, that are blown away by our facilities when they walk in. And so I've been just so impressed with how he's embraced this program, how he's embraced the transfer portal. And I think the previous regime or maybe the previous leader of the program tried to tell you about all the negatives. And I think this guy that we have now, Coach Mora, tries to, I don't think he even tries to. I think he sees the positives. He sees the excitement of the fan base. He sees that a group that is willing to give him what he needs to succeed at the highest level. I mean, I know I'm going long, but really quick, I've even talked to some people in the administration that have spoken about how grateful he is for what UConn has afforded him in trying to rebuild this program. So from a 30,000 foot view, I just see a guy that sees the potential that I think we as UConn, I'm an alum, I can't speak for you, but I know you're the biggest fan that I know, and I see a coach that sees the same things that we as alums and we as fans see for that football program.
Absolutely. And I think just to see him embrace the athletic department as a whole, I mean, he's showing up at baseball and softball and soccer. He's getting to every game he can on campus. I mean, I like to see that momentum being built under Jim Mora. I'm curious, when you look at things from a national perspective, and I think you mentioned it a little bit as you were talking there had been so much talk of UConn basically was a punching bag, I feel like, in terms of football from a national perspective. And I think that narrative's finally starting to change a little bit under Mora. Have you seen that being more involved from this at a national level, and, being involved in talking with others at the college football level who are, big time SEC fans and things of that nature?
So I do think so. And listen, it's going to have to result in wins at some point on the field.
Definitely.
And again, I think UConn fans are realistic. But what my kind of go-to line at this point last year, when, not quite last year, when Coach Edsall when Coach Edsall retired, and I'm using air quotes for the audio people that are listening, what I said was I just believed in the potential. And so I think the one thing that people are seeing from the outside, yes, it's an independent. Yes, it's not a quote unquote Power 5 in the football space. But when you have transfers from Alabama, transfers from Texas, transfers from Kentucky, Missouri, Texas Tech, the SEC, the Big 12, what that shows me, and what I think it shows a lot of people, what I said a year ago was UConn might not be Alabama, but it's not Akron either. It's not, no disrespect intended, but whatever, Texas, San Antonio, Florida International, whatever. And so I think when you see transfers from the biggest programs in college football that, yes, it didn't work out at Alabama or Texas or Kentucky or whatever, but they see a place where they can be showcased, where you're playing big time programs. I mean, definitely. Obviously Michigan, Ohio State, Tennessee over the next couple of years off the top of my head. Ole Miss a few years ago was on the schedule. I think that might have been the COVID year. But I think the transfer stuff has changed everything because, as someone who follows it on the national scale, Akron, San Jose State, they're not getting like literally a dozen, Power 5 transfers. And I don't know the exact numbers. You and I have talked about it privately. I don't know where I can even find all of the transfers.
It's all over the place now. Yeah.
Yeah. But, a kid from Alabama, unless he's really desperate or whatever, there's certain schools that he would consider and wouldn't consider. And so I do think now that people are seeing, oh, this is a spot that a kid that it didn't quite work out at Texas, but maybe it'll work out at UConn. Didn't quite work out at Alabama. It's one thing if it's one of those guys, two of those guys. When we're talking about 8, 10, 12, 15, whatever the number is from the Power 5 level, from the programs with the best of the best, and they're saying I can still get exposure, opportunity, I can be developed for the professional ranks, which, oh, by the way, Coach Mora, we both know is selling behind the scenes. I think it really has changed. And I'll say really quick too, I think the perception of Coach Mora has changed a little bit too, where, I live in LA, so it's a little bit different, but I don't really know how people perceived him from the outside. But I think people are now starting to realize, wait a second now, UConn has a coach that not only coached in the Pac-12, not only won division titles and won a lot of games, he coached in the NFL too. And I know that's obviously something that's resonating with recruits as they get to campus and not only see what UConn's about, but what Coach Mora and his staff are about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned it earlier too. Hopefully this narrative switches when results are able to be seen on the field a little bit too. And I'm cautiously optimistic, I think, about this team heading into this year. And I know you're a gambling guy like myself here. And I know we've got this set at responsibly, of course. We've got this set at 2.5, which you can't take any action on if you're in Connecticut. But for those who might be out of state, can you see this UConn team getting 3 or more wins this year?
I mean, I can. And it's because of, one, there's obviously a talent upgrade. And the thing too is, and me being kind of a football and basketball guy, the one thing that basketball coaches always say is we wanted to get older in the portal. Well, UConn, from a football perspective, adding a lot of guys that are 4th, 5th, 6th-year guys in college football. So you're adding, obviously, SEC, Big 12 level talent, and it's not across the board, but there's some. and you're adding older experienced players to the program as well. And so I do think the talent upgrade, with the fact that, let's be honest, and, it's painful to talk about, but, they weren't all that far away in a couple games last year. Obviously, the Vanderbilt game sticks out. Again, my parents are, my mom and stepdad are season ticket holders at Rentschler Field. They never gave them up. Shout out to my mom. I think there was a couple of times where they seriously considered it. But, Wyoming was close. There was a couple really close games last year. And so I think, obviously, when the coaching change was made, when Lou Spanos came in as the interim, and I know he's still with the program, those guys at the very least bought in and played hard. Now you have a slight talent upgrade. You have a coach that obviously believes in what you're doing. As a gambling guy, and I know our friends in Connecticut can't bet on it. Maybe soon in Massachusetts, you could just drive up to across the border and go to Massachusetts.
Exactly. New York, New Jersey, you got options.
There you go. So listen, I'm not saying get in the car, with every dollar to your name, but I do feel pretty good that you look at a talent upgrade. I believe an across the board coaching upgrade, and a couple games that could have gone the other way last year. I like the over 2.5. I do.
Can you see this team that they've got a few Power 5 opponents on the schedule this year? They've got BC, they got Syracuse, they got NC State and Michigan there. Can you see them giving a Power 5 team a run for their money this year?
Well, I mean, they probably could have, maybe should have beat Vanderbilt last year.
Yeah.
So, SEC fans would say that Vanderbilt's not really a Power 5 school, but, so no, I mean, listen, and this is not disparaging any of the players or the coaches, but I think, first of all, I'm just going to say, I don't think the gap, even though UConn is in a rebuild and in the very early stages, I don't think, based on what I saw last year when the team was bought in, talent upgrade again, I don't think the gap is quite as wide as maybe the outside observer would think.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think you look at the national rankings that come out where they do the 1 to 131 and UConn's like 128, 129. I don't think they're at that level anymore. They might be there right now just based on a national perception, but I think by the end of the season that changes.
Yeah, I agree. And then the other reality is, and I hate to say it, whether it's true or not, is that I think a lot of people still are going to look, unless you get off to a really good start. I think people are going to look at UConn as a win on the schedule. And so all of a sudden you show up, you're well coached. We know Coach Mora's teams play really hard. And the talent differential, as we just discussed, maybe not as big as people think. Yeah, I think they give people challenge. BC is really well coached. Jeff Hafley's a really good coach, but Syracuse is kind of an interesting one. Dino Babers is kind of like pseudo hot seat-ish. Yeah. I don't really know where he's at. I could absolutely see it. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a fun season. The storyline that's taken over college football, though, I feel like this summer has been conference realignment, and
sure,
UConn's kind of been on the outside this round, kind of making their own path here with the independents in football and Big East and the rest of their sports. Given the landscape, and as you've covered things from a national perspective, personally, I love the independent schedule. I think it's great. They get great opportunities. Can you see independence being successful for them long term?
Well, I think because UConn fans are realistic, I think independents can be successful because they have a different, set of expectations. Now, what'll be interesting more than just the expansion stuff is what the college football playoff looks like, and not from a UConn making the football playoff perspective, but more so, I'm curious if there's a 16-team playoff, do we still have a bowl structure? I hope we do. I like bowl games. I know that it's become this weird thing where it's like people don't acknowledge that bowl games are awesome and they're really fun to watch on, December 28th when you're home from work and you have nothing to do. And so, oh my goodness, God forbid I watch Minnesota, Arizona State in the whatever bowl. But I think that obviously would play a role, is what becomes of the bowl structure? Do we still have them? How many? All that stuff. But, I would also say too, is like, it's going to be, the whole realignment stuff is so interesting. And I do live in Los Angeles, as I said, and being on the ground for the USC, UCLA stuff, knowing people at both schools, they're excited, but obviously trying to figure out what the future of the Pac-12 is as we talk here. frankly, what the future of the ACC is. I think that early on there was some panic and everybody was kind of trying to get out of that ACC contract, but now we know it's a little bit more. I think as we record here on 8:00 Eastern time on August 3rd. And I don't know when we're going to drop this, but that's when we're recording, because the realignment stuff, you got to be careful.
It can come at any time. Yeah. You
that's
never
what
know.
I mean. By the time we're done, the ACC might not exist anymore. So I think weirdly being an independent right now at this moment is the right spot for UConn. Now, again, if the ACC is airtight and we're not, I don't know. I don't think it's the worst thing, but again, I think part of it does depend on what does a college football playoff look like? Is it 12, 16 teams? But then also, what is a bowl structure? Because obviously there's going to be a lot of teams on the outside looking in, and you would hope that if you have a good 7-5, 8-4 season, not just UConn, but anybody, that you get rewarded with that postseason game. That's the part that I frankly even, I think I'm pretty plugged into what's going on, but that's one thing I can't really answer is what would happen to the bowl structure if there is college football playoff expansion.
Yeah, no, definitely interesting times all around here. I want to move. I know you're a basketball guy too, and it's the summer, so it's always fun to think ahead and get a way early look at basketball. What have your thoughts been on Dan Hurley and the job he's done here so far?
All right, so me not being in Connecticut, it feels different because I really sensed some frustration late at the end of the year last season, and obviously losing New Mexico State, I get it, right? You don't want to lose in the first round of the tournament. I think what he's done is incredible. I mean, I really do. And I'm trying to make sure that I have my years correct, but year one there was a major culture, change that was needed. And year two was the last year of the AAC going into, they were the hottest team in the AAC.
Yeah, heading into COVID. Yeah.
Canceled the season. Yeah. And so year three, he makes the tournament, has a first round draft pick. Year four. And by the way, I watched all the games. I get the frustration with, not how the season ended, but there was, big leads, blown leads, stretches offensively. But I think that's part of building a program. And I think, one thing and it was funny because again, my parent, my mom, my stepdad are both UConn alums. I'm a UConn alum. So, when there's an awkward silence at the dinner table, when I'm visiting or they're visiting me, we talk UConn. And I do think the next step is, kind of the caliber of player, not just, like across the board, right? Like so I'll give you an example. And I love this kid. You may have had him on the podcast. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like Isaiah Whaley, like really played so hard, but he was really kind of limited in what he could kind of do outside of about 5 to 10 feet from the basket. But he played so hard that you love him. But you kind of hope that, as UConn progresses in the evolution under Dan Hurley, that you have a player that plays that hard that maybe is a little bit more skilled, that can step out and hit a three more consistently, that can put it on the floor, do those sorts of things. And so I'm very impressed. And I know you go in as a 5 seed last year, you want to win a game, you want to play Arkansas to go to the Sweet 16. Yeah. I get that. I'm a believer that it's very much a process. And the one thing I give Coach Hurley credit for was the pivot in the transfer portal. I mean, he's been, and I don't really know Coach Hurley at all, so it's not any inside information, but I don't get the sense that he wants to recruit the portal. He said publicly, I come from an era where guys take their lumps, they stay in a program, they develop, they get better. But we know that a couple guys transferred out, and it was on him to go into that portal and find guys that could come in and help. And I thought he did a good job of that this season. We'll see what Tristan Newton, all the guys that came in over the course of this offseason, what it actually means once they step onto the court in a UConn uniform. But I'm really excited. And I'm excited about the trajectory. And the other thing too, I'm excited about is kind of like the retention of players, where it feels like guys aren't really leaving before they're ready, where, Jordan Hawkins could have tested this year just to test the draft stock. And Andre Jackson has that NBA level athleticism. He could have tested just to say that he tested. And they were like, no, I'm good. I trust coach. I'm going to come back for, develop, work out in the summer, get better, and kind of continue the development. And I think both those guys are NBA players, but I think it's a good sign that they trust him, where they don't have to force or rush the process.
And again, since you're now looking at things through a national light, I know here that the talk is how everyone loves Adama Sanogo and what he could bring in, and looking at him from a national perspective as a potential, big time player, getting that recognition nationally that he might not be getting right now. What do you think about Adama Sanogo and his game?
Well, I love his game. I do, worry's not the right word, but I think there's always, everybody, I love college basketball, but too often guys are too focused on showing what they can do for the next level rather than doing what they do well at this level. And I think it's about finding a balance, right? And it's not just Adama Sanogo. It's Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky, where you're reading reports out of Kentucky that, he now has 3-point range. Well, it's great that he has 3-point range. He's also one of the most prolific rebounders in the history of college basketball, at least on a one-year basis. Like, shoot your threes, but make sure you're still getting us 15 rebounds a game.
Yeah.
Because that's what just made you the National Player of the Year. Same with Drew Timme, same with Hunter Dickinson. And so with Sanogo, I like his development. I still think the important thing with him is a couple things, like relatively new to the sport, getting better, certainly got better from freshman year to sophomore year. Now I'm excited to see what he can do. But I also think it's just about kind of staying true to what you're like really good at. And he's a great rebounder. He's great around the rim. I know he missed some layups here and there last year, frustrated some people, but great around the rim. And I just think it's especially at the college level, it's about finding that balance of making sure that you're developing skills for the next stage of your career while also being true to what makes you great and what made you an all Big East caliber player last year and what makes you potentially the preseason Big East player of the year coming into this year.
How happy are you to have this team in UConn as a whole back in the Big East?
Well, I'm thrilled. And, it's more like, by the way, how funny is it? Maybe you can appreciate this. Like all these schools that are scrambling right now, I'm like, I tried to tell you 10 years ago, it sucks.
Yeah.
When UConn went through all of it and everyone, deal with it, blah, 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 this and that. I'm like, no, it freaking sucks when Arizona
it's like gut kick after gut kick. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Arizona fans right now, they don't know what their future is, Oregon. And it's like, how much does it suck that you compete at the highest level? And then that just doesn't matter in the world that we live in. So as a UConn kind of fan and alum, it's nice to kind of be on, like you said, kind of the outside and just being able to see others. And I don't want anybody to suffer, but it is interesting. But no, I mean, I remember talking to people even at that time where it's so many different things, right? It's the prestige factor. You're not in the Big East anymore. It's the, it's the rivalry factor where you're playing a bunch of schools that you're not familiar with. And this is, to me, the saddest part of all the realignment stuff is that I do think, and that's what makes college sports. And so, even again, living in LA, I understand why. And like the weird thing about living in LA is like you talk to USC and UCLA fans, they get why all these decisions were made. But like UCLA basketball fans are bummed that they might not play Arizona.
Right. Yeah. They don't want to go to Rutgers. Like
exactly. And it's like, so exactly. And then I think, from the AAC perspective, the thing that I kept hearing from people inside the athletic department was just how brutal the travel was like, and I think that's something USC and UCLA are going to have to deal with where, and this has been one of my things on my podcast and my radio show is like, again, we get why the decisions are made, but I would love to talk to the UCLA soccer coach or the USC whatever coach in 4 or 5 years from now, because I remember talking to people at UConn and I just remember people saying, until you experience those road trips, you don't realize how brutal it is, where back in the AAC days, you're playing 2 home games and you're flying to Dallas to play SMU. And then maybe you're staying over 2 or 3 days to play Houston. Then you got to fly all the way back from Houston to Connecticut. Then you play a home game. Then you got to fly down to Florida to play UCF. Then you fly back, and then a week later you're flying to New Orleans to play Tulane. And it's like, that was the thing. It wasn't just the prestige, and it wasn't just whatever. For the non-football sports where you're only playing 4 or 5 road games a year, it was just the travel that I think Yeah, it was really wearing on people by the end of it. That was the big part that I don't think a lot of people really talk about, at least from UConn's perspective. Now, from USC to having, as you said, fly to Rutgers or whatever, that's a different deal. But I don't think from UConn's perspective, people realize how daunting that was for the athletic department.
Yeah. I'll wrap with this one. I think it's been a fun chat around taking a look at UConn athletics
so.
in the national picture, because I don't think we necessarily get that enough being here, and now that you're exposed to that and being around more people. I'm curious, and we'll wrap with this one. What's UConn's what do people think of UConn now from a national perspective? Their general thoughts on the program and where it stands now.
Is this football or just the athletic department?
I'd say athletics in general.
Yeah, I think from a national perspective, I think really well respected in basketball. I think not enough credit for football, as we discussed. And I don't think people realize how good some of the non-traditional revenue sports are, right?
Yeah, we saw what baseball did this year.
Baseball, I thought that was a huge, we know men's basketball, we know women's basketball. The fact that UConn was one game away from the College World Series, I think spoke to this is a great athletic department, not just a great basketball program or women's basketball program. I tell people all the time, I was on a panel a year ago with Nancy Stevens from field hockey, Hall of Fame coach, national championship coach. Men's soccer, women's soccer are nationally acclaimed programs. And, I don't think people realize how good the athletic department is, not just the basketball program. So, that's the world we live in, and part of it is, again, not being in the SEC, not being in the Big Ten. I don't think people appreciate it. But again, going to a Big Ten baseball environment and winning 2 games in College Park to take that regional, basketball speaking for itself, women's basketball obviously speaking for itself. I think people respect the UConn brand. I don't know that me being in, but also out because not living there, I would say I don't think people realize how good of an athletic department it is. And really, again, to go back to my conversation with Coach Mora, maybe a little bit of your conversation with Coach Mora, how well supported these coaches are. When Jim Penders can turn down Michigan in the Big Ten because he feels like he has every resource needed to win at the highest level, that's a great testament to UConn. Same with what Coach Mora said. Obviously, Coach Hurley, Coach Auriemma speak for themselves. But I think that's something that, maybe it's my job to try a little bit harder to let people know. But when I say it, people don't listen to me anyway.
They think you're a homer. So, yeah.
They do, yeah. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Well, you know what? Maybe UConn plays a good week 0 game against Utah State or pick off Syracuse early in the season. It gets people talking. So you never know.
I was telling somebody today, I don't know if you know who Utah State plays in week 1.
It's Bama, right?
They play Alabama in week 1. I was joking today. I said, I already have the tweets drafted of when Alabama wins 59-0. I'm going to tweet something about how UConn beat them up for Bama, and that's why Bama won so big. So, no, man, I'm excited for the season. It's a process, but what's cool is really quick, and I know we got to run.
Yeah.
I know I was on campus as the football program was really being built the first time, and I've joked with people, but I remember when Darius Butler committed and Tyvon Branch committed, and I know Darius a little bit now, and Orlovsky's a few years older than me, but I remember all of that process, and to see it kind of happening again, it's a little bit different. It's a really cool experience, and I'm really excited for Coach Mora. 60 years old. I think he knows this is his last job, but he's fired up to be there. And I know we got to talk basketball and women's basketball and all that stuff, but for football, I'm actually genuinely excited to see the process of this program being built.
I'm with you 100%. Well, Aaron, I appreciate the time as always. We'll have to have you back on again at some point soon. So thanks so much.
Anytime, Jared. I appreciate you having me, man.
Anytime. Thanks.